Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
We recorded a program with Dr. Dario Nardi recently, Personality Types in Yoga or Jungian Yoga, that we released here at Personality Hacker. And it was one of the best times I've had recording a program because we got to go outside and we set up a whole yoga studio set. And it was really cool because we got to work with Dr. Nardi as well. I got to kind of play movie director a little bit with the GoPros and the cameras and then work with Christian editing. Anyway, it was a really fun program to put together. It was designed to talk about, Carl Jung and yoga and some of the teachings and writings he brought out of India in the 1930s. So Dr. Nardi walks through this and he applies it to personality type. It's a great body-mind program. And as we're putting the bonuses together, Dario said to me, he's like, hey, can you help me film this exercise that I want to have in the program? It's called the Human Connection Exercise. We sit down and we start going through this really interesting experience together where I'm like looking into Dario's eyes. I'm holding his hands. I'm noticing things about his breath and behavior, and the emotions are coming up for me. And it was like this very, very interesting emotional and human connective experience. And so we got talking a little bit more afterward, and he said, well, I actually learned this from another person who was my acting teacher in Los Angeles when I was living there. And we got talking even further, and he said, would you ever like to have her on your program and talk about this directly? I said, yeah, that would sound great. So finally, we're able to invite and have both Dr. Dario Nardi and Iris Klein, his acting teacher, come here to the program today to be a part of a conversation around this exercise and some of the things that came from it. So welcome both of you, Iris and Dario, to Personality Hacker.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you.
And a pleasure as well.
Well, right. Well, welcoming back Dario Nardi, because you've been on the podcast many times. So let's talk a little bit about that concept of the human connection exercise, or I understand it's also called the Iris Klein exercise. Let's talk a little bit about what is it, where does it come from, a little history, and how it relates to personality type.
How it comes to be is this exercise was originally developed by a man named Sanford Meisner. And the exercise was developed for actors to connect actors to behavior. So they would work off each other in a behavioral way, not about the words, about the behavior of what you're getting from your partner. My mother taught acting for years, Janet Alhanty, and she brought the exercise to the heart. How she did that was by connecting it to the feeling. How do you feel about that? Whereas in Meisner's technique, you never addressed how you felt. So a lot of times the exercise becomes, the way it's taught by many, many people, becomes very aggressive and confrontational. Ultimately, I think because they're not able to address how it feels. My mother brought it to the heart. I have been working since I'm 9 years old, doing this work. And then I developed it to bring it to the present tense. So the words, we stay present in the words. We made a connection by, if we're in the room together, holding hands equally, physically creating a posture so that we're open in the heart. So now the exercise through this work of bringing it to the feeling also brings it to the heart. So it's taken it out of any kind of ego context and brought it right to the heart. And truthfully, I feel that when we speak from the heart, everything we say is true. When we speak from our ego, other things show up. And this way of working, we've cleared a path so people can look into each other's eyes and experience each other from the heart, truthfully, rather than from an ego space. That kind of brings you up to date. Yes, Dario?
Yeah. So my experience, I remember the first time, a few years ago, and I watched people go up to do 10-minute sessions with each other and maybe 5 minutes of discussion afterward. And they're there on the stage and the spotlight, and there's an audience in the dark sort of watching. And it was described to me as a sort of like a stretching exercise that one does before preparing for an acting scene, or just in general to keep up one's ability to coordinate with others, to work on timing and emotions and all of that. So I watched the first pair of people go, and I understood what was going on generally, and I found it really terrifying, just to watching that. And then, fortunately, I didn't have to go quite yet. And I watched a second pair of people go. And by the time, I'm focusing on this and what they're doing and trying to remember the sort of how to do the process. By the time they finished the second one, I was exhausted from watching. And I really felt I need to take a break. And then eventually it was my turn, and I was paired with someone that I thought, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm going to have anything in common with him. I don't know how I'm going to do, but let me just try it and see. And it was a little bit of a roller coaster ride, and it was also a really amazing experience. Mm-hmm. And I remember leaving the session on that day, the class, and there's a whole bunch of people, so there's like 15 people in the room, and we go in pairs, and you might go twice. And I left that day very excited. And I said to my friend, it's no matter what, I'm coming back. Yeah. And when I was in Los Angeles before COVID, then I made a habit of it as much as I could. I also took, Iris, your acting basics class, and I sat in a couple of times on the scene study, just to sort of gain an appreciation for how this very foundational activity works. And of course, I was also thinking in terms of what you all as listeners know me for, which is the personality aspect of it, and seeing people of different personalities go up. And I don't necessarily know what their personality is just from sitting in the audience, but time and time again coming, and many times there's people who, come one week after the next, and you also see them up there in a very sort of intimate way. And just to gain a sense of what are the challenges, what are the strengths. And it just really impressed me, because you might wonder, oh, okay, my interest is personality type, or my interest is Jung. And so why would I be interested in this? Well, one is that we all have emotions. And how can we connect to those? And this is the same, it was said in Jungian yoga. It's about a body-mind practice. And really, there's a continuum there. And in Kundalini yoga, they talk about chakras. And so the body includes the heart and the gut. And yes, we can go up to our head as well. And this is a great activity to get people out of their head. And I think it's important to remember that sometimes in the personality language, there's sort of this assumption that certain types of people, meaning the personality type-wise, intuiting thinking types, live all the time in their head, and that other people live in their body or in their heart. But you know what? That's actually not what Jung said, and it's not what Isabel Myers said. Mm-hmm. That actually Isabel Myers said everyone lives in their head. And so what is the wisdom that we can get by returning to our body and our emotions, and working with all that stuff that's just outside of the, there's sort of this convenient container of awareness that we have called the ego. And what happens when we let that down and let other information come in? Yeah. And for each person, it's going to be a little bit different. And I love, in particular in this process, by repeating it, is like every time with every person, there's going to be new things that come in. There are going to be regular challenges that come up that make sense for one's background, for one's personality type, all these things that we can work on and release this fixation, this particular sort of like put on behavior that we might have. Mine, for example, is to simply move quickly, always keep things moving quickly. So just to relax that for a while and to allow it. And I'll end by saying, I think it's a really great developmental piece, yes, in that sense of whatever is in shadow, in a way, to come up. It is also really great for anybody who feels like, oh, at times I'm not in touch with how I really feel, or what's really going on with me, or what do I need? Not to mention the people around us. And I remember I had to learn to practice walking into the class. I'm driving there to class. I'm thinking, how do I feel today? No, I mean, how do I really feel? And sometimes it would take 10 or 20 minutes into the class. I'm like, oh, that's how I feel. Just to release that. So to be able to name something really helped, and then being able to release it and to, as Iris would say, to address it. And I've invited friends into this process of different personality types. I remember one in particular, an ENFJ, and she thought, oh yeah, this is totally up my alley. This is going to be sharing with somebody else and being intimate. It's going to be really easy. No, she found it really hard, because we all have things that are in the shadow that are difficult to deal with. We all have emotions. We all have interpersonal connections. We all have problems with those. How do we deal with all of that? So I think this is relevant to everybody.
Yeah. Can you paint us a picture of what this method or exercise looks like, so we can kind of visualize what exercise a person is going through and why it might ping different people differently?
Well, physically, two people sit across from each other, facing each other. If we're in the room, I like to take hands together. Making that physical connection immediately saves about 6 months of time. So we hold hands together. Both hands are facing in the same direction. In other words, both palms would be facing up, or both are facing down. In other words, not one person is caretaking the other by physically having their hands holding the other hands. We're holding equally. We face each other, we sit tall, we look at each other. I like to take a breath together, to really look into each other's eyes and take that moment to breathe each other in. And then my experience, if I am one of the partners, my experience is my partner. So if I'm working with Dario, I am looking at Dario and he's my experience. I leave myself alone. I'm not worried about me. I worry. Worry is a word, it's a verb. We're not really worried, but my experience is Dario. I will get something from his behavior, either how he looks at me or something he's doing, some bit of behavior that I'm getting, and I'll address it. And then he'll repeat it. I could say, you smile. He'll say, I smile. You smile, I smile. You smile, I smile. That will lead to something else. We say it about 3 times. The first time, it's just words. The second time, a point of view starts to develop. By the third time, it's digested. We're not asking questions. I'm not saying, are you smiling? I am saying, you smile, because we start to trust our instinct, start to trust what we get. As a result of me discovering Dario and Dario discovering me, ultimately, I'm discovering myself through him. We discover ourselves through the other, which is extraordinary. It's a beautiful experience. And I'm not worried about me. I'm not taking my temperature to see how this is. It's just my focus on him, his focus on me. And as a result of that, a feeling will come up, and then we address the feeling. And, the next thing you know, we have a very intimate relationship in that 10 minutes of time. You can experience your partner in that 10 minutes. You can be in a relationship for 20 years and not have the experience you will have by looking and sitting with your partner in the room holding hands. I do it on Zoom now. We're not holding hands, but it is as intimate as can be. It's a very intimate exercise because we are in time with each other. We are not in our stories. We are in the moment. And that is key. And I find that is what's most challenging for a lot of people, is to simply become present. I remember when my kids were like in the first grade and I went to a conference, they call in the parents and it's the whole, grade. And they're well, kids are in first grade and they're like, well, this is for second grade and this is for fifth grade and this is for sixth grade. And I raised my hand. I said, I teach acting to adults, and the hardest thing is to get them present. And now I understand why, because we are reared to be in the future. We got to do this for that. We got to learn this for then. And so it's very hard because we've been so trained out of the moment to just simply get present with each other.
So the exercise, you use the word intimacy a couple times. It sounds like what it's doing is it's fast tracking an intimate experience between two people by constructing it. It's like, okay, we're going to go there. We're going to go 0 to 60 right now. We're going to get inside another person's experience and we're going to be totally present with them, which I can't really think of another context that encourages that. In fact, I see a lot of sort of constructs and society sort of pushing us away from an intimate experience with other people.
Well, I think it can be very scary for people to just be present and look someone in the eyes and have an experience of something outside of themselves. It can be frightening, but once you do it and then you do it again and you do it again, it becomes a way of life. You don't want less. You want to be completely present and with your partner, as I say, in the room or on Zoom. It's and yeah, I agree with you, Antonia. It's almost like here we are, and now we're going to show up. We're going to be with each other. And do you have a choice in that? Yeah. But what's the choice? The choice is if you don't show up and you're not connected, you're not going to have an experience. You're not going to have that opportunity to be in the now with your partner. And then that discovery of the self that comes out of the connection is beautiful.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
We teach a course that helps people interview another individual and then arrive at their best, what we call the best fit personality type. And one thing that we've observed that's so powerful through all of that is just the act of interviewing another person and being with them and listening to their story and listening to their perspectives. It helps people feel seen, maybe sometimes for the first time. Like how often do you have somebody sitting there asking you about yourself for 45 minutes? And what I hear you saying here is that it's another way for a person to feel seen, but not with content and data that's coming out of their head, but just with who they are and what they're manifesting in that moment.
Absolutely. You are seen and you are heard. And it is very touching to watch it and to experience it. You will see when someone feels seen and heard, like the tears will roll or laughter will ensue because it's so big. It's an enormous feeling to be seen and heard, and it is so touching. And I am taking this work. It was initially developed for actors because 90% of acting is listening, and you've got to be a really good listener to be a terrific actor. And I've now taken this out of just the acting class and I'm bringing it to corporate work because how wonderful for your team to be on the same page and to really listen and experience each other. So I can understand in the interview process, as you're saying, Antonia, that it's a tremendous experience to do it. I think to watch it is pretty wonderful, but it definitely is life-changing.
So in that interview, we talk about it being a psyche-to-psyche experience, but this sounds more like heart-to-heart experience.
This is totally heart to heart. There was a moment there when I called it the heart to heart technique, because it is. It's all from the heart, and what comes out of it is world peace. That's my plan. Ultimately, is to take it to world leaders and put them in a room together and assist them to really experience each other. And as a result of that, I'm telling you, world peace ensues. I came up with a line. World peace starts with two, and one of them is you. And it's really pretty much that simple.
Yeah, what a great mission. As you were talking about the actual method itself, the technique itself, and you said we're not asking questions, we're
Correct.
making statements, and it made me remember this thing I read or heard, like, I don't know, a couple decades ago, that just popped in my head when you said that. Somebody said, when you're getting to know somebody new, whether it's a romantic date or a new friendship or just getting to know a new friend or something like this. They said that the most intimate thing you can do is make statements to the other person, like observational statements about the person. If you're on a romantic date, for example, making statements about them rather than asking questions. Questions put people on the defense. It makes people feel like there's a power dynamic at play. And statements are really nice because they're observational. They're offering. You're taking the lead and making the effort to insinuate something. So you're not putting the other person on the defense by asking the question. You're making the offering initially. And so they were talking about how this builds such incredible intimacy. And it sounds like that's what you've really tapped into here as well. Maybe you want to speak to that a little bit. What is happening in that process through just making these statements back and forth?
Well, let me just say this. The thing about questions, you talk about beginning a relationship or something. The questions are always about story. Where do you come from? What do you do? Where do you live? What do you think? And that's all story-based. When we are in the moment with each other, we're not in story. We are in this moment in time together. And so it's not that we don't have story. We have story, but we're not here to tell our story. We're here to be with in the moment. So the other thing about not asking questions is that you start to trust your gut. You start to trust what you're getting. Now, if I say something to you and you don't agree, you can repeat that back to me as a question. If I say you're wearing a black shirt and it's orange, you would say, I'm wearing a black shirt. You're wearing a black shirt. I'm wearing a black shirt. You question that. I question that. In that way, you can question. But we're not throwing out questions in terms of, so what do you do for a living? We are right here in the now. And it's very exciting to experience another person in the moment. It is very intimate. Like, I think that you break down the word intimacy, it's in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have a question for you, Dario. You said it was terrifying and exhausting.
I was going to do the same thing. Ask him. So what was that about?
That's a funny question. So I understood in sort of this broad way that, yes, what's happening during the exercise is that the person needs to let go of whatever persona or ego defenses and put themselves in this place that's very open and vulnerable. And of course, there's also, there's not work to be done, but to pay attention to the process. So it just takes a lot of focus in a way that maybe a lot of people aren't used to in focusing on somebody else. So just that amount of focus, also knowing I'm quote in front of an audience. I don't really think about that now, but on the first day, I certainly thought that. And there is this level of vulnerability, and then the fear of like, oh, what if I mess up? Not do I do the process incorrectly? Because yes, it's my first time or second time, whatever it is. So that's fine. And ultimately, and I have to say this was very true also, Iris, in the acting basics class, is that I felt very comfortable because you emphasize that there's no wrong observation to make or no wrong emotion to feel. It's sort of like, for those of you who've ever done mindfulness work or Buddhist meditation, where you're simply noticing, oh, yes, this thought is coming in right now, or this feeling is happening. I can simply report it, and that's okay. So if I become distracted during the exercise and I go to my head, I can say, oh, I go to my head, or I notice in the other person because their eyes shift. I'm like, your eyes go off to the corner. And that's fine. And even if it's something more, so one of the things that was definitely, it continued to be a challenge, was the first time I went with another guy, and that was pretty straightforward. And then the second week I came, I went with a woman. And that was more difficult. And I especially found that when I would be paired with someone who would remind me of my mother, that absolutely created this big block in me. I do not want to be interacting in an intimate way with this person. Intimate in the sense of like, no, there's a boundary between child and parent, or this child and this parent. I think Iris would say, the person sitting in front of you is not your mother. And this is another different human being. And so just to notice that and to allow myself to put that to the side, or to report that. And of course, that's about me. That's not about the partner that I'm working with. So Jung talked about this idea of, central to so much of his work is this principle of projection, that we're projecting onto the other person our story about them. And how do we withdraw that projection? And so that's the work. That's why it was exhausting, is because I'm withdrawing the projection and I'm being vulnerable and I'm paying attention so much to the other person. And then at the beginning also, what if I mess up or that magical moment doesn't happen or something like that? And that's okay. That there is no should to happen, and it's just the process of letting go with that. Yeah, so that's my answer. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is an exercise that is on the outside. It sounds quite simple. It doesn't sound like it has a lot of complexity. And what I've observed is that some of the most powerful experiences, particularly ones that help us process our emotions, get to a place of intimacy, they're usually not complicated, but you use the word challenging. And I think a part of it is that we feel silly, right? We feel vulnerable, exposed, and kind of silly when we do some work like this. And I feel like, particularly for maybe thinker types, there's this sense that you have to push beyond that thing that's making you feel self-conscious around it. Because the exercise itself is pretty straightforward. But it sounds like if you can get past maybe some of that sense of self-consciousness or even what you mentioned, Dario, which is like, oh, this is kicking up a bunch of stuff for me. Like all of a sudden I'm thinking about my relationship with my mother, right? That's basically the barrier of entry. It's not the complexity of the exercise. It's the ability to get through one's own resistances and do something that makes you feel exposed and like, well, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that. But it's like, well, but if you get to the other side of that, there's some really amazing ahas, insights, and self-reflection that's available to you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've worked with a lot of people. I worked with a director who came into the class and he said, you could give me $1 million. I will never do that exercise. Because, to watch it's either scary because it's so intimate and we're not really accustomed to intimacy. I think that we talk at each other. We don't look at each other. We got our phones. We have a lot of things that we can avoid being present and being in the moment. The exercise is simple and not necessarily easy. If someone is afraid to look someone in the eyes, it becomes easier. But I've worked with, we in the room, we would take hands together. I had two fellows working with each other, and the one fellow says to the other, the only time I've ever felt another man's hands is when my father smacked me across the face. And it was so powerful because of this connection, first the holding the hands together and making this connection here and looking at each other and then hearing that. Everybody really just lost it in that moment. It was so painful. Just to kind of segue a little bit, what's so beautiful here in this exercise too is to see two men, two women, a man and a woman, to sit opposite each other and to really experience each other in the intimacy of the moment. I find men go to war, men kill each other. Men don't really face each other in an experience and look at each other and see each other and then connect in a heartfelt space. And I think that this exercise and the way we work it really it changes lives, because you can feel that we haven't been experienced in this way on a daily. We're just not. And so it's very powerful and yeah, simple. Yeah. Not necessarily easy, but it is simple.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we instinctively, like when we know we're going to enter a vulnerable place, I wonder if we instinctively know that this is a context for re-imprinting. Like you mentioned, the person before was like, the only time I've felt a hand of another man was when I was being hit by my father. Well, this is a context now to re-imprint this relationship that person has with the touch of another person, particularly a man. And so when we feel, like, you couldn't give me $1 million and I do that, it's like, I don't know if I can hand myself over to an experience that will allow me to re-imprint some of these narratives and stories from my past. And that's why it sounds like it's powerful.
Yeah, very. I can't tell you how many people have stepped down off the stage where they're working and had an experience, and they go, I haven't talked to my father in 15 years. I'm going to go home and call him and tell him I love him. Because it brought up something in this experience with their partner. It brought up something. Maybe they did see a glint of their father in that person's eyes. And suddenly, like, your understanding is much more expansive and forgiving, in a sense, because you feel the humanity of all of us. We are all human, and we're all, we can be very hard on ourselves and hard on each other. And it's just an opportunity to say, hey, we share a lot in common, in that we're both human, and we're both, got our fragility, and we've all got our stories. And here we are together in it, and we are in it together. We're all in the same boat. And I emphasize that in my class, that we're all in the same boat, so that we're not separating and judging and watching. We are all in the experience. We're not observing. We're not an audience. We are all experiencing what is happening at the time. So we're not sitting back in judgment.
We will be right back. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker. Now back to the show.
Dario, would you speak a little bit about sort of the impact exercises like this one have on maybe different personality types? Like you mentioned, you saw quite a few different styles of types go into like this particular exercise. But this idea of, I just kind of want to maybe go one click up in concept and then tie it back to like the tool you guys are teaching right now, this tool that you're offering kindly to sort of express this is a way that we can tap into these elements. But can you talk a little bit about like the developmental component, maybe some resistances, maybe just kind of tie it into how different personality types might relate to an exercise like this?
Sure. So let's, I can just mention some typical types or the functions, and what are some examples of things that will be challenges for them. Mm-hmm. So for the extroverted feeling types, by that I mean the FJ types, you might think, oh, right, this is going to be a great, like easy exercise to do, working off of the other person and so on. But a lot of times they come in with a desire to please. They have in mind how I'm supposed to act, or what does it take for the person to like me. In fact, much of their life may be oriented around building up certain boundaries so that everyone is nice together, that people like each other, that either they're acting as a social lubricant or that there's like a right way to do things socially. Gender roles can come into it. Oh, you're a male, so I'm sort of expecting that you're going to act this way. And there's, those are all things that need to be overcome. I mean, they hopefully can be overcome in the process. To contrast that with, let's say, like we talked about thinking types briefly. So let's say ENTP, for example. This is a type that comes in and is very intelligent, has a meta-awareness most of the time, has usually a great sense of humor. So naturally, they're going to be wanting to have a discussion. Now, they do have this open-ended style of let's discover things together, but they're going to tend to keep it on an intellectual level. And the actual sort of vulnerable parts of them, the sensitive parts, which are things like, oh yeah, people tell me all the time that I'm smart, but they also think I'm a complete dork and they don't understand me. And I feel like I accidentally hurt people all the time, that I'm a weirdo, that simply to be recognized for the different dimensions that they have there, that they're a human being like everyone else, and to watch that person in the process sort of calm down when their partner recognizes them for who they are. So that's very nice to see. There's also talking about the FP types. So the introverted feeling. This can be a very easy process at times because they are in touch with feeling. And that tends to be also based in their own feeling experience, which then can make it challenging. They also can shift mood easily from one day, from 1 hour to the next. So they come in with a good mood, they come in with a bad mood. They come in, they don't, there's something about the other person they just don't like, and they take that very seriously. This is a like, this is a dislike. And so how to step out of their own introspective emotional space to actually work off of the other person. And if they're in a good mood and they feel expansive and energetic, that can be easy. But when they're not feeling that way, boy, it can be really tough. And they also tend to carry around, because the feeling is very much kept inside, that it's like, oh, it's my responsibility. I should be dealing with this. And you don't have to deal with anything during the exercise. You don't have to carry all of this baggage. You don't have to be up and happy or whatever it is. It's just like, if you need to cry, cry. If you need to be, yes, I'm angry, then that can come out of it. So really it's, and then for my own type, for those with the extroverted thinking, that there is this business of living attitude. This is an activity. This is a task that we're doing. Oh, we have 10 minutes to do it. Oh, what am I supposed to do during this exercise? Oh, okay. How well am I performing in it? So like, what are the metrics? And did I succeed at it? And so I need to sort of let go of that, all of that industriousness. This is not like an assembly line. It's not a computer program, all of those things which mechanically I'm very comfortable with, and get in touch with not only my feelings, but yes, the other person also. It's like, what is going on with them? Not in this sense of, how have I sat with them before? What was that experience? Because that was in the past. And so there, when we went before, or, it's like, how is this going to end? I'm already sitting down and thinking, how is this going to end? That's ridiculous. I don't need to think about that. That's living in the future. So it's just letting go of those things. And as you described, Antonia, about the program with ENTJs, how do we become aware of and process our emotions? And this is a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like it gets to the heart more almost through perception than through a judging function lens. But our judging functions might have some challenge in there. Like we bring an expectation of how things are supposed to roll out based on how we think we're supposed to be performing and showing up. And this sort of detethers that expectation element of it. Like there's no should statements here. There's just a being present with the other. And by doing that, it gets past what it sounds like. It gets past persona, like you mentioned. It gets past this idea of like the ego defensiveness. It goes straight for whatever is at the nucleus of this moment and removes all these obstacles that we usually place in front of us in order to be truly present with another person. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And I would add to that something that's very central to Jungian psychology, which is the alchemical transformation. That, we can't do alchemy with only one substance sitting in a test tube, to use his metaphor. We need 2 test tubes. So there are 2 people, and there's, if a reaction can happen and we allow it, it will happen. And that reaction can be transformative. And it doesn't matter how the personality is configured sort of consciously, we all have this capacity we have a shadow side, we have this capacity for alchemical transformation and being willing to engage in that and to discover, wow, I'm not even using my preferred favorite dominant function as well as I could. So I would say to the person who's, say, an ENFJ coming into the class, who relies a lot upon this extroverted feeling and constantly monitoring what's going on with the people around them and has empathy and understands their feelings. And that person can be at the mercy of the whims of all of the people around them. And if those are not good people in the sense of healthy, and the person also has this external locus of control, how do they reclaim themselves? And so this is a chance it's a laboratory to engage in this alchemical transformation. And it's not just something, the example I think of is when a sword is made in a forge, it actually needs to be reforged and reforged and reforged multiple times. That it's laid out and it's banged out, and then you heat it again and you bang it again. And it's a whole process that takes a lot of time in order to give it not only the shape, but the strength that goes with that new shape.
Yeah. We're talking about it in the purpose of this is to express a tool to the audience member who's listening. Like this is an exercise that's a tool to help you get into these elements of yourself. But really, the tool points to a bunch of human needs that I think are generally going unmet in life. We have such you mentioned, Dario, this kind of concept of the business of life. And even if we don't have those extroverted thinking preferences, I think we all have been sort of imbued with this idea of what the business of life is supposed to look like. And so this particular exercise and tool helps point out basic human needs that I think are going generally unmet in at least the cultures that we're brought up in and basically brainwashed in, right? Our culture brainwashes us in a good way, right? If we're not brainwashed, we're feral, so we kind of have to be brainwashed. But then on the other side of that is like, oh, my culture forgets this aspect of it. And that's part of shadow, right? Like it's like when we're really good at doing, say, extroverted work, our shadow ends up being sort of internalized or introverted work, the stuff that we need to do on the inside. So I really appreciate you bringing forward a tool, like something a person can do, an activity that allows them to tap into those things, like the needs that go sort of perpetually unmet in a lot of our Western societies, which is this, the constructing an exercise to get right into an intimate space. Mm-hmm. It sounds terrifying. It sounds like you'd pay $1 million not to be there. But the truth is that it's like it's actually sounds pretty straightforward and simple. And if a person can put themselves in that context and get past all of those obstructions and challenges that come up for them, which is like, oh, I don't want to do this. Oh, this is an intimate space. Oh my gosh, I'm super vulnerable. Oh, now I'm now I'm rewiring a bunch of stuff and I'm in a place of re-imprinting. Oh God, oh God, oh God, right? Like all the instincts come up to not do it and to back away. But as with most of these tools and exercises, the way out is through. So can you talk a little bit? I mean, you've already hinted at it. And Iris, you talked about sort of like your finger steepling, sort of mustache twirling goal is at the end of this is world peace. But can you talk about what a person experiences right afterwards? And you mentioned this idea of a crucible, of like sort of being if a sword is being forged, you have to be reforging it. Can you talk about some of the experiences that people have when they put themselves in this context over and over? And what are basically the practical results?
Well, a couple of things. Firstly, the exercise, my focus is not on me. My focus is on my partner. So what happens to me comes as a result of what my partner makes happen in me. I'm not coming up there with I feel this and I'm going to make that happen. It's out of my hands. I am not going to construct anything. I'm going to be completely present with my partner with what shows up. As a result of my experiencing something outside of myself, and my partner is experiencing me, we are completely seen and heard. As a result of feeling and being seen and heard, we walk away experienced. And as I said earlier, like tears flow, laughter happens, because when we are seen and when we are heard, it's very touching. And I think it's not that familiar for a lot of us to be seen and heard fully. So we walk away from that experience with the discovery of ourselves as a result of being connected to something outside of ourselves. And I think that it's not that familiar because we are very insulated. I think we're more insulated now than ever, which makes me very concerned. We got masked, we got phoned, we got earphone, we got, our like point of vision has become somewhat myopic. And so to really put your focus on something outside of yourself is glorious. It's expansive, and it changes your world. Would you say, Dario?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much of a benefit that comes from repeating the process week after week, month after month. And certainly there are times when I think not only it's a little bit like going to the gym, not only I'm getting a benefit, is not only that, it's also there's going to be this resistance that's, maybe I'm tired at the end of the week or something like that. But also I'm like, I don't know, like, do I want to go through this again? And it's actually not difficult at all. It's just like the ego whining. When in fact, I know I'm going to feel great at the end of the process. And then I would say that's one way, is through this repeating this process. And so there's two other things. One is watching other people go is so fascinating, because watching to other people, that's not really, at least officially, it's not about me. So why would I be interested in it from like a purely ego point of view? And yet it's fascinating because I will see interactions that I will not see publicly and maybe not even privately. So one example is this. As a male, I see other males just interacting with each other. No females are around. And then I also see and experience men and women interacting with each other. It's not common for men to see two women interacting with each other without any men around. What is it that's going to come up? And so that's just, and sort of not that that's relevant every time, but sometimes it's relevant and very interesting. Is also fascinating to watch the different dynamics. So one of them, Iris, you mentioned, is about caretaking. So there's one person who's going to be like, oh, I see that you're in pain, so I'm going to try and make you feel light and happy, or I'm going to try and relieve that in some way. And how the person does that depends on the person. So they might try and be light and happy. They might get serious actually and start crying with the other person. There's like a variety of responses. And then that becomes like we're not on equal footing anymore. We give ourselves a job, as Iris would say. And then there's projection as well. And watching this, for example, I remember there was a young man and young woman up there, and the guy comes up and he starts interacting with the gal as if I want to say like how he's supposed to, as a young man, like take care of his date and be in charge and in control and be like the manly dude. Then he would also read on her, and I say read on her expressions. He would project in that she's being distant, she's being difficult, she has an attitude. She didn't have any of those things. That was all him, because he wasn't really, he was seeing something physical, and then he was creating a story around that and then voicing the story. And then she did call him out on this, but I think she was also a little bit surprised at like how extreme this was. And he was young. I mean, he was younger than her, and I have seen differences in age as well. But whatever it is, I've also seen two people fall in love on stage. Spontaneous. They didn't plan this. It wasn't part of a script. It just, this is what happened. And so that's very beautiful for someone to get in touch with something they realize is deep within themselves, or to notice something about the other person that just brings this like brightness and smile to the other one. It's like, oh, I can really see like, the playful little devil in you. And that's, it's not a bad thing. I'm just reporting that, and it comes out of the process, and then the person really does feel seen. The third thing is when we take this, if we want to the next level, which so Iris also teaches this acting basics and then scene study classes. And in those classes, we're taking, this is like the foundational process to remain in time with the other person. And then we're adding upon that actions that we do, tasks that we need to accomplish. There's a backstory, there are roles that we're playing. How do we juggle all of those different things in a balanced way? And I mean, that I have to find, I hadn't been a student in a very long time until I took Iris's class. And at first I'm like, oh, I feel so stupid. All these other people, at least they took theater in high school. And there was even one or two people in the class, who've been in like a TV show or a movie or whatever it is. And I feel like I'm struggling the whole time. But all of that was fine, because it's like, we're just learning and we're just practicing. I don't even want to use the word just. And so it was that practicing, balancing all of those different things. And I want to come back to this alchemy aspect of it, that one of the neat things that at least came up for me and how to get through the acting basics class is that we focus on these sensory experiences. So it very much in type terms is a sensing task. It's like, what are we actually hearing, seeing, feeling physically on the other person or in the environment, whatever it is. And at the same time, we're allowing that to sort of go into the unconscious and meet with something there, and something magical comes out of that. And so it really is, and Antonia, you mentioned this, like the perceiving functions. So much of this process is sensing and intuiting coming together and mixing in a way that produces something new and magical. And the way to get that started is by saying yes. And this is the same thing Isabel Meyer said, always start with sensing. Is we start with the physical clues inside of us, and we remain open in the sense that we allow those windows and doors to the unconscious. And we trust that a mixing is going to happen sort of under the hood. And then it comes out. And then I think that has the capacity to transform the judging functions, feeling and thinking, because now we've had the experience and it's very memorable. And we're like, yeah, that image of myself, that story that I have, that judgment that I've had about this kind of person or that kind of person, like I can let go of that. And we've had an experience of that. So that is the different ways to practice, by repeating it, by watching other people go, and then by using it as a foundation for doing tasks and scenes or whatever it is. That all of those are really great catalysts to do self-work, self-coaching or self-depth work.
Yeah.
May I add, while talking about the senses, within the exercise, when we're in the room together and holding hands, I had people close their eyes together and work. And when they close their eyes, other senses kick in. Now I'm feeling that person's hands. When my eyes were open, I probably didn't necessarily feel them, but now I've closed my eyes. My sense of touch is much more exaggerated. My sense of smell is much more aware. So closing off one of the senses, it makes the other senses expansive. Also do an exercise at the beginning before we do anything. I do a meditation, like a 5, 6, 7 minute meditation. And one of those exercises is to connect to the senses. Close your eyes through the meditation, and then we listen and we smell and we taste, all just ourselves, but there's flavors in our mouths, there's scents in the air, we're breathing the same air, we're connecting, and we are, I think, very disconnected from our senses, because senses are intimate. Smelling a flower, eating, tasting the fruit, it's very intimate. And again, I think we've just been like so shut down from the intimacy of our senses, of each other. And so this is getting back in touch, connecting.
Yeah.
And I would say when we use the word senses, that might think then, but aren't sensing types more connected to their senses? And Isabel Myers in Gifts Differing said that all of the cognitive processes are in the head. And Jung emphasized in psychological types that all of the types are living and responding at essentially at a programmed level. So yes, someone with sensing preference will have some extra appreciation for action and detail and so on. But when they see the cup and they notice these things, they're going to respond with the stories that they have about the cup. What is its practical application? Who bought it? How expensive is it? What am I going to do with it? Those kinds of the practical things as opposed to imaginative things. But they're still actually disconnected from their senses in the most basic way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate that you have introduced a tool like this, because, Dario, I think it was maybe last year or the year before, I don't remember. I just know that you were talking about the concept of the epidemic of loneliness. And when you made that phrase, the epidemic of loneliness, it really stuck with me. And I realized a lot of what we do is to combat that. What are ways that we can combat this epidemic of loneliness that people experience? And I think it starts with self-intimacy, right? If there's a way to be alone but not lonely. So you tap into the self and build relationship with the self. But then there's also tools for being able to be truly intimate with other people. And Iris, you mentioned when you do this exercise enough, it becomes a way of life. And I'm assuming that you grab souvenirs from these exercises that you bring out into your day-to-day life. Like you probably have much richer conversations with cashiers, right? Or like somebody who's, just going about their day. You're able to bring the souvenir of creating quick intimacy. Yeah. And a connection with another person, I'm assuming. You want to speak to that?
Yes. Well, I think, I like to believe that I'm present 24/7, but of course I'm not, because I'm only human. But I am able to connect to people and to hear beyond the words. Again, the exercise isn't about the words. The words help us to communicate and get to a place. But the exercise is about behavior. So behavior is beyond the words. The line rides on the behavior. It's like music. You could hear someone say something, but there's something else going on. And I think that what I'm able to do is to understand what's going on beyond the words. And I think that comes as a result of this practice as well. And you don't even have to be in the room. You can hear it. You're on the phone. Hi, how are you? Yeah, good. No, what's going on? No, I'm fine. No, I hear something. What is it? Well, da. So listening beyond the words The exercise assists to become a behaviorist, which is valuable.
Thank you both for being on the show this week. I think, so if you're listening along and you're interested in what both Iris and Dario are talking about, there's really two methods to tap into some of these exercises. The first thing is if you live in the Los Angeles area or if you want to work with Iris directly. Iris, I'm guessing you still teach acting and you also are using this in more other formats, right? You want to bring this to other places.
Yes. Sure.
How can people find out more about you if they're interested in maybe connecting with you directly?
I have a website, actingclassnow.com.
Great.
Actingclassnow.com. And I'm on Zoom. So I'm working on Zoom all the time now. So you can be anywhere in the world and meet us.
Fantastic.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Actingclassnow.com if you want to look up more about Iris and maybe do some work with her directly. Also, we've produced the Personality Types in Yoga, Jungian Yoga with Dr. Dario Nardi, who's been on the show right now as well. And you can also, that's just one of the bonuses as we walk through this exercise, Dario and myself. So want to check that program out. There might be some really great things in that program that help you awaken to the body-mind connection in relation to personality type, right? And the chakras and all of this stuff. And what we're talking about today on this entire podcast is just one bonus in that entire program. So that's another access point for you as well.
Yeah, we want to thank both of you for taking your time today to walk through what sounds like a very powerful exercise that you have been working on, Iris. That it sounds like a lot of love and attention went into this methodology. So thank you very much for sharing it.
You're so welcome. And thank you so much as well for doing all that you do, bringing us together.
Cheers. And thank you, Dario, once again for coming on Personality Hacker Podcast and connecting with us with cool, interesting people and cool, interesting methodologies. And once again, thank you for showing up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just want to emphasize to listeners that trying the Zoom class, the Human Connection Zoom class or the Iris Klein connection, it's not like you have to sign up for 10 weeks and make a big dedication. You know, you can come once and you can experience it and then make a choice from there.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Thank you both.
So what do you think? You've been listening along as we've been talking to Dario and Iris. You're the fifth person in this conversation, but you haven't had a microphone like the four of us. What's coming up for you? What do you have to share? We'd love to hear from you. Come over to personalityhacker.com directly below this episode. Leave a comment, ask a question, or more importantly, share your personal story. When Iris was talking about this and Dario was talking about this, what was coming up for you? Have you had these kinds of experiences with other people? What is your threshold for intimacy? How have you discovered intimacy in your life? Does it frighten you or turn you off? Some of the things we've been talking about, like, oh, I would never do that. I'd pay $1 million never to do that. Is that how you feel too? Come over to personalityhacker.com and make your voice heard.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review for us on iTunes, that helps us out a lot. I read every one. Please come let us know how you're enjoying it. We have a book. It's called Personality Hacker. You can get it in all major book retailers. And if you leave us a rating and review on Amazon or on Goodreads, that also helps us out a lot. And as we mentioned, we have a suite of programs that are personal growth oriented through the lens of personality type. And we really want to highlight the Personality Types in Yoga program. It's our body-mind practice program. We are very proud of it. We really enjoyed working with Dr. Dario Nardi on this program that talks about body-mind practices through the lens of Carl Jung's personal experiences. And it has a lot of rich media in there, there's yoga sessions, breathwork sessions, this human connection exercise. So if that sounds like it's up your alley, go to personalityhacker.com, look at our suite of programs, and find Personality Types in Yoga.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you, yes, you, on the next Personality Hacker podcast. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work, to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.